Greetings, brothers and sisters. So over the side here, Pete Buttigieg. Trump has lost a step since campaigning in 2020. And because now Trump's the old guy, right? So they can say that. Anyways, I did an introduction to this video. Today's Saturday, August 10th. And I did an introduction yesterday, but then something's happened. Trump did something. I did this video yesterday, or I put it up today. I completed the video yesterday. Tampon Tim versus Maxi Pad Don. And in this video, it features Tim Walz. Here it is here. It says, dramatic moment, Governor Tim Walz stops his speech as a rally goer has medical issue. And then the following day, dramatic moment, Tim Walz stops rally and calls for help while rally goer has medical issue. One of these was in Wisconsin. The other one was in Michigan. And then, again, Forbes documents this here, right? Dramatic moment, Trump stops Montana speech to ask if there's a doctor to deal with a medical emergency. So this is in a 3-day period. Forbes is documenting this happening 3 days and doesn't ask or allude to that this might be fake. So let's get into it here.
Sir, for her record of failure and weakness. A doctor, please. Doctor in the house.
Doctor in the house.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Doctor in the house.
Thank you. Take your time. Take your time, Doc. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. They have this glitch out here with Forbes. Their videos have these glitches.
Thank you. Thank you.
Woo!
We love these people. They wait for 2 days sometimes, and then it's tough. It's not easy. Are they okay? Thank you very much.
Who are they? Is it one or two? How many people have fainted?
And doctor, take your time. Good. Thank you, darling. Thank you. Thank you.
Boy, that doctor got there quick, huh? The doctor got there quicker than the Secret Service with Trump's fake shooting. Fight, 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 fight. So look, he's doing another staged event, and these guys are recalling his last staged event. Look at the microphone's blocking his non-existent wound on his ear and scar that never happened because there's no damage. But he's now doing a staged event and tricking them and trying to act like he's caring, and there's a doctor runs over there. He's doing it. He's doing his little...
Take your time, doctor, please. We got a lot of time, right? Nice Friday evening. Friday evening in Montana. I think my next drive is going to be about 3-4 hours from here. I wish it was a little closer, that's the one thing. But that's okay.
Why is he even campaigning in Montana? Like, it's not as... He has zero chance of losing Montana.
That's all right.
So they just have these glitch outs here, right? Okay, so this is, there's my compilation of this. I'm going to add this to my compilation as well. But here's Tim Walz in Michigan.
And I'll tell you what, we share a lot between us in the upper Midwest. We share... Oh, we need some water. We have somebody down. We need some water. Medic. We need a medic.
Doctor in the house. Is there a doctor in the house? We need some water. Is there a doctor? Trump did in the water. He failed. Trump missed the water thing. You got the...
Here. You got somebody here? Got him? All right. We got a medic on the way. Thank you for caring for your neighbors. Thank you for showing what Michigan does.
Yeah, show thanks for Michigan pointed out. He just happened to see that, right? It's just so fake, and they suck so bad at acting. And yet they're doing it and they get away with it.
Look, freedom is when... Freedom... Can we get somebody to help? Somebody's hot. Somebody's hot. Can we get somebody to help?
Somebody's hot out there. So there's a hot person out there. So they're like, can we fry some eggs on them? There's a hot person out there.
You okay? Drink some water, folks. It is hot out.
And drink some water, because you guys don't know that you're dehydrated, and like you guys have that thing that you're feeling is called thirst. You're thirsty.
Get somebody up. Thank you. We get water?
So weird. They're so weird. This was the first one. Okay, so we saw this. I showed you this yesterday, right? In a span of 3 days, there's one of these events every day for 3 days, and he's doing his during the day, so they're using the heat as an excuse. Trump's was done at night, so there was nothing, right? But this, is staged. They have this thing called the stump speech, right? So here's Kamala Harris, and then there's this. I can't believe anyone's buying this stuff so fake.
So good to be back in Michigan. Listen, let me tell you, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. And listen, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I took on perpetrators of all kinds and had a summer job at McDonald's. I had a summer job at McDonald's.
Obviously somebody voting for Trump, right? Probably, right? So people think, oh, Kamala's fake, but of course Trump is fake. And Obama was fake, and Biden was fake, and Bush was fake, and Clinton was fake, right? They all do this. And let me show you the little bits of the compilation here. But before I do that, let me just say this. I'm editing. So the way a stump speech works, well, I call these people the controllers because they have to control everything. And when you're lying and you're being deceptive and you're putting on, it's a staged manipulation, then everything has to be controlled, right, as best you can. You don't want anything that shows through people are so stupid now. Like, you just see how stupid people are, that they accept these things. They're so desperate, so hardened in their ability to, just talking to your sheeple relatives and people, and you show them the people in your life, then you show them the evidence, the overwhelming evidence, and they'll just won't get it, right? And, people who are locked into this and their hopes and dreams are tied into Kamala Harris or Trump and all the rest of it, then, for them, it's like you can't tell them anything because it's like telling a kid there's no Santa Claus, right? It's just everything's, hinges on this guy being who he says he is, or Kamala or whatever it is, right? And when people see the world collapsing, then they need hope, and they need, those specific people need to delude themselves, and it's most people, so they can't hear it at all. And that's the problem with this. But even with that, they want to control as much as possible because, it's just better that way. They don't want anything that's going to create a gaffe or a situation where they have to explain themselves or, the peek behind the curtain. And so they have these stump speeches, and the candidate is saying the same things over and over again. Of course, Trump goes off, off the script occasionally. But they want to have these things already in place. And so when somebody faints in the audience, if it's a real fainting, if somebody actually fainted, well, they might die, right? And that's not good for the campaign, especially if Trump's out there saying, get a doctor, get water. And he looks like he's failed and couldn't save that person. So that's why they have to put shills in the audience. You understand? It's a lot better if they have a shill that doesn't at risk of dying or something like that, right? Because, look at what happened to Taylor Swift when one of her concert goers died. And there's just bad press for it, right? They don't want to have something like that. And so when there is somebody who has a medical emergency, they don't want to make a big deal about it. They want to get that person out of there before it becomes a story. But for somebody who was a shill, or for somebody who's, had fake passing out and it's a staged event, Trump's ready for it. He's rehearsed it. They said, all right, at this point in the In the speech, you're going to notice somebody in the audience, right? It has to be orchestrated. It has to be something that's controlled because they control everything. Like, they're very detailed oriented because it's all lie. And, you know, if you allow the thing just to run its course, then the truth's going to come out. Here are little bits and pieces to the compilation.
Sorry, what's going on? Somebody's not feeling good? All right. Why don't we have, we can get our doctors back there to help out.
Is there a doctor in the house? So they stuck a pregnant woman behind him, and this is the one that got them all caught. Then all of a sudden, some people started noticing they'd seen this before and put together a few compilations, and then I did further research and put together like more extensive compilation, right?
That one illness.
Like, how'd he know to catch her, right? How'd he know? Like, she was wavering.
Oh, you okay? I'm right here. I got you.
He saves her.
No, you're okay. This happens when I talk too long.
The joke's often there. Makes a joke.
Why don't you go? You got it? Come on.
So there's that one. Okay, so this is Bill Clinton. He was the first to do this. He's campaigned for Joe Manchin here. I guess he's older here. I think I have an earlier one of him. He was the first person to ever do this.
I need to put this country to work. We need a doctor here. This lady fainted in the heat.
Doctor in the house? It's diagnosing her, taking control.
Let's give her some water. It's hot out here.
So those are two lines, water and doctor. Right, that's how they take control. Trump does it.
Doctor in the house, please. Doctor.
Is there a doctor anywhere? Doctor?
Doctor, please.
So Trump does it, right? And so he copied it. Michelle Obama.
She's okay. It's okay. That happens to a lot of people who have to stand up for a long time.
Standing up. If you have to stand up for a long time, you fade. It's just fact.
We need one of our medics here.
Medics? You got a medic?
We've got a young girl who fainted. But it happens all the time.
So medics, and then he'll say something about water.
She's going to be okay. Sometimes standing up. If anybody is starting to feel tired, standing up, bend your knees, and eat your breakfast.
Boom. And water. Rick Santorum here, he got into it.
Sorry, we have someone who's, I think the heat has got to them. So make sure if there's any emergency personnel that can get here,
Like a doctor.
I want to make sure that this person gets some help.
Some water.
Taking control.
So he got a chair out, this guy, right? I showed the whole compilation. Obama was doing it all the time.
Give him a little space.
Let's give him space. That's space.
This happens sometimes. You guys been here a while?
Happens sometimes. It happens sometimes. It's just normal.
Just
Taking control here.
like somebody might have fainted up here. If we got some of the EMS,
Some kind of a doctor, some kind of water.
somebody,
EMS, somebody fainted.
don't worry about. Folks do this all the time.
They do it all the time. He's always fainting. So they tag team it here.
Give him some space. A doctor in the house, please.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, please. Could we have a doctor, please?
Hillary got involved.
I am struck by how many young people. There's somebody fainted.
Did somebody faint?
Somebody fainted over there.
Over there, did somebody faint?
Can we get them some water, some help?
Water and some help, a doctor perhaps? Here, he botches it here. What about a doctor? This guy can't even get the lines right.
Folks, it's okay. Forget. Want some water?
Want some water? No, you gotta throw it. She's way over here. Just throw the water bottle at her. Like. That's great. cracking at my own joke here. Doctor, it's water. So, you know, that they all do it. So there's a term called political theater, where they act and put on stage performances to elicit a response from the audience, right? And so they're not charging you admission fee. I guess some cases, the donation is, but they put on these stage events, and they do this, right, because you have people who have grown up on television and like drama, and this is ways to get attention, and they do all these things, right? We see the way that people do this on social media and all this stuff, where they pretend something's an organic moment when it's really staged and contrived, and it's there to manipulate their audience. And so once you do this behavior, then everything that you present in your stage and your performance is considered performative, right? Anything that you present, everything that you do like this is going to look like it's staged because you stage stuff, because you're willing to engage in this behavior, right? And Trump's willing to do this, right? Trump has something like 45 credits on IMDb for acting. I mean, the whole reality TV is staged, right? And all that stuff. It's not real reality TV, right? It's all contrived and edited and performative. And then, of course, he did cameos in movies like Home Alone 2, right? Like all those things. So Trump is an actor. Plus, he did WWE and all these other type of things, which is what his shot in the year was. So once you understand that he's willing to do that, because these other people are, like if you're a Trump person, Republican, you totally see that Obama's fake and Kamala's fake. They have these stump speeches that they do and all these things. They repeat these same lies. I mean, these stump speeches, they used to go across the country and give the same speech. And it was supposed to motivate people. It, was supposed to check various boxes. The only problem is that these speeches are now all, videoed. So you see it over and over again, because it's like a comedian now goes out and does their comedy bit. And it seems organic, the jokes or whatever. But then you see people who are now recording it on their phones, and then they're doing these bits and they're practicing them on the road for their big special. But by the time the special comes out, you've already seen a bunch of the comedy bits because they've been videoed by people's phones, right? And so, this is the age we live in. And so these things are said over and over again, that people can find them and catch them. I mean, Forbes caught these guys doing it. It's not even acknowledging that this is staged and faked, right? And so if you're going to have people sit in the audience and be shills and faint for you and then put on a performance like this, then you're completely compromised as a person and you can't be trusted. Everything that happens at these events, these rallies, has to be questioned. And so if he can have somebody faint, then he can pull off a fake shooting, right? They just have to get the Secret Service involved, and they have to compromise the government. But why aren't anybody calling Trump out at doing this? Why aren't the Democrats saying it's fake, right? Why isn't Kamala saying it's fake? Why aren't they calling each other out for doing these fainting bottle stuff, right? Because Trump mocks them. He mocked Kamala's phone call, where she called up, the Obamas called her up, and it's completely staged and, performative and these things, right? They have the audio on both ends. They have the whole thing going on there. And Trump mocked it as being fake, right? But they're all engaging in this behavior. And so once you realize that they pretended that he was assassinated and the media went along with it, then you realize all this stuff with the criminal investigations of him, all the things that happen is all bullshit, right? Like it's not real. Because why would they allow him to get away with perpetrating these frauds? These fraudulent activities in front of his crowd, including saying that he was assassinated, like it's a fact, when it's so clearly fake and staged, and the guy's willing to do this. Then this whole thing about him being somebody they don't want around and they're trying to put in jail is fake. If they're not trying to kill him, right? If that's fake and pretend, if he's having people faint in the audience and that's fake and pretend, then all of it's fake and pretend, right? Then they don't really hate the guy like they say they do. And some of them might, because they're too stupid to see through it. They're just cogs in the wheel, some of the media personnel. But the people who control the system and running the game, they like Trump. He's their asset. And so everything they've been telling you about him saving the country, him saving the world, is fake, right? And so, like, it's all fake. And none of this stuff is real. The fact that they're persecuting him, that's not real either, right? And so once you see that as a fraudulent, then the whole thing, the whole system, because it's both sides, there's no reason to vote at all. And one way you can prove this to yourself, which, you should be already. If you can't see it, or, if you can't see it by now, God help you, right? But one way you can prove it to yourself is, since I was a kid, when I was born, Kennedy had just been assassinated. So I was born, Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president. And of course, Nixon followed him. And I grew up with the Nixon impeachment that happened when I was a little kid. The first president, I remember that a little bit. And the first president I've known is Jimmy Carter. And then there was Ronald Reagan, and there's Gerald Ford after, I remember that too. Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and then the Bush, Bush, and then Clinton, and then Bush again, and then Obama, and now Trump. And not one of those presidents was transformative in terms of anything good or great or anything like that, right? There were ups and downs, ebbs and flows. The economy and the country kept on chugging along. There are some things that happened, some signature moments for each person, things that, are kind of considered historic, like the fall of the, Russia, which, was maybe something to do with Reagan presidency, maybe not, right? But in terms of domestic policy and, there's things like the internet happened, things like this, right? But the president had almost no effect on all of it. I mean, there's some wars and things like this, but not one of these presidents was transformative. Not one of them saved the country. Not one of them drove the country into the ground. They more or less were just a carnival barker, right? The COVID thing happened. It wasn't Trump's fault. It was beyond him. It was a global psychological, operation. Biological weapon was released or whatever, I mean, that's what I believe. And, the actions that he took, he was forced to take. And then the results of it, and they said that Trump was going to destroy the world. He didn't. And then they said Biden was going to destroy America, and he didn't, right? All these things. And both Biden and Trump talk about their accomplishments, right? And, depending on how it's affected you personally. Like some of these things have affected people positively, right? But most of it, you don't know, right? There's this immigration issue. And if you're not affected by it, like you don't see any difference personally, like you just hear about on the news. Like lots of things, you hear about a hurricane hitting on the other side of the country, and you see all the devastation. But it's different if you're there in the hurricane. But for the most part, some people's lives collapsed. They had their own apocalypse, and some people had boon years where they became really rich. They had some kind of an epic financial windfall or something. And there's things like that. For the most part, people are just chugging along, unaffected by the president and the policies that are given and all these things, right? And so we know what a Trump presidency looks like, and it wasn't any better than the Biden presidency. In fact, it was much worse in terms of some of the things they pushed through. I mean, he got COVIDed. The COVID thing happened under Trump, and then the gender thing happened under Trump, and a lot of liberal things happened under Trump. And the Antifa riots and the BLM riots and all those things happened, right? Under Biden, the economy eventually collapsed at the end. And then there was, the post-COVID stuff. But these were things that were already in play by the script writers and had very little to do with the presidency itself. So there's nobody saving you, is the point. The president doesn't have the power to do that. And these people are not great people. They're actors. And they're part of some kind of a dramatization that's playing out in front of you, the thing I call the show. And once you see through a little of it, then you have to see through the whole thing. It's not just one little piece. It's not one little piece that Republicans want to call the Trumpers want to call the deep state. It's the whole thing is a deep state, right? The whole thing is performative to keep you in line, to control you, and to, manage the mob, right? I mean, this whole political theater is about managing the mob and keeping you from going ape shit, people from rioting and things like this. Every elite establishment, elite type of society fears the mob, right? It's a handful of people that are, billionaires and trillionaires and multimillionaires who are, enslaving the rest of the people in some form of slavery. Now it's wage slaves, and where they, everyone else is just making ends meet or, barely surviving or living, the quality of life is poor. And then you have these really elite rich people, using the global, it's not just here in America. I mean, it's a global type of situation. And you understand the poverty and misery that's out there, then, the mob going crazy on the so-called elite is inevitable. And so that's what this stuff's all about, is a binary system to focus your anger and blame on some other part of the system and yourselves because you're the ones who are voting, right? Well, look at these people voting for Biden, or look at these people voting for Trump. And so your ire gets pushed on your fellow slaves instead of people controlling the system. That's all this is. That's all it ever will be, right? It's already being managed and scripted in a way. There's no democracy. You have no say in it. And most of the things that are playing out have already been in the works and in place for, 50 years or so, part of a global plan. And it's a plan to keep a system that should have collapsed years ago going. And once it collapses, we're all fucked, right? And so, this is where we're at. So here's the introduction that I gave yesterday, but you should realize, like, once one thing's fake, it's all fake, right? Once, part of it's fake, then all of it's fake. It's not like it's partial, it's all or nothing, right? So let's get into it here. Okay, so there's a major point I forgot. I just want to add it before I get to my introduction from yesterday. So when you realize these guys are all actors and it's fake and staged and they're not really after Trump and Trump isn't the guy that you thought he was, and some people, what people believe about Trump is that's different than everybody else is that Trump isn't your typical politician and that he's going to be some sort of a maverick or he's going to go rogue and in ways these inbred politicians can't do. But then when you realize he's part of it, then that's not possible. There's no outsider. No outsider can get in and get elected. And so you just have these people. And if it's as desperate as they say it is, and as desperate as it appears, then there's nobody coming to save you. There's no hope in that, right? There's no chance of a political solution here. And so if there isn't a political solution, there's no economic solution, right? The debt is growing astronomically. And there's no religious or moral solution because our religions have fallen and our people have fallen. And the people themselves are getting worse and worse. Our kids are getting worse and worse. Weaker and weaker, right? It's becoming idiocracy. And so there's no way that this can be saved, right? I realized this 2014 or 15, when I looked at the derivatives market and I saw that there were banks that had quadrillions of dollars, right? Trillions and trillions of dollars, hundreds of trillions of dollars of derivatives of debt on their books. It's all fake. It's all garbage. It's all, it's just bad debt. It's like the worst kind of debt. It's debt betting on other debt, right? It's debt betting on other debt to fail. And when you added up these banks, JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs and these other banks that had lots of this derivatives on their books, it was over $2 quadrillion. And then we have over $2 quadrillion of debt, right? $500 trillion of regular debt and then all the derivatives market. And there's, the plan itself isn't worth $2 quadrillion, right? All the resources. And so we can't ever pay that off. And I realized with some of these other things that there was no way that this could be solved. Of course, there was the predictions I had in the Sajmark Spiritual Organization, the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, and not only the prophecies, but saying that this was spiritual work and part of a spiritual plan. And part of that plan was a new paradigm, a new sort of way of being for human beings, a more spiritual system would be built on the bones and ashes of our current system. was sort of a direct quote from it. And so I knew, all right, so this is over. Like, there's no, just accept it and prepare for it because there's nothing we can do. There's some people say that it's depressing what I say here. Some people call me black-pilled, whatever. But it's none of those things. It's either true or it's not. It's either going to happen or it's not. It's either inevitable or it's not. And you've grown up believing the hero's going to save you, believing that at the last minute everything's going to be reversed, because that's what you see in movie after movie, that there's going to be a happily ever after, that you just got to get through this bad time. But then you realize the bad time is the whole system. Like, the whole system is the bad time. It isn't a bad period in the system. It's that the system itself is demonic. But even if it wasn't demonic, it was a beautiful system. If it was a spiritual system, it was a divine system, right? It's still going to collapse because civilizations collapse. It's happened over and over again. If you understand there's a history of this, there's never been a too big to fail because everything dies, right? Everything dies. And so there's civilizations, there's runes. Our societies are built on runes, and, there's collapsed civilizations in the bottom of the ocean because the ice age melted and the water levels rose and these civilizations went underwater, right? Like, things like that happen. And when there's an ice age, there's all this land mass is exposed because all the water is up there in, polar ice, right? But when that water melts, then everything goes underwater. Like, that's happened. And then there's been all these other ways that civilizations and empires have collapsed. And it's historic. It's just what history is. It's all these empires that rise up to a high level of technology and wealth and things and then collapse. It's a constant. It's what happens. It's what happens to these civilizations, right? And there's ruins of it everywhere. You can find the ruins and artifacts, and archaeologists, they find this stuff all the time. And we're going to be that, right? Like, that's what's happening to us, right? We're going to be, an archaeological dig site at some point in the not too distant future. And so once you accept that, it's not negative or positive. It's just what we have to deal with, right? And so, I think more and more people are starting to realize that. And it's painful for you. But once you get used to it, you enjoy the ride, enjoy the system while it lasts, enjoy the good things of the system while it lasts, and prepare for what's going to happen next, because somebody's got to survive. That's what pockets of the future is. Like, there has to be pockets of people who are preparing and getting ready, and spiritually more than anything else, internally, but in all possible ways for what's about to hit. Because it's going to hit and we can all see it. And being in denial isn't going to stop it from happening. All right, so let's get to the introduction I did yesterday. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Just a quick little introduction here. I got an epic comic. Today's Friday, August 9th. I got a video I just put up today that'll be up tomorrow, entitled, let me see what it says here. Tampon Tim versus Maxi Pad Don. There's some other stuff with that. There was a video before that. I got an epic comment here. But first, here's another comment I want to get to. Hopefully this is easy to find here. Mr. Romano's YouTube is finally recommending your channel. Again, happy to know the channel is on the up and up. I'm not sure what that means. Up and up. Glad you're back, bro. So these are those comments. I don't know if this one's one of those. That is not. And so this has to do with the fact that YouTube was shadow banning me. My channel's kind of making a comeback. It's doing okay. Like, it's not doing what it needs to. I'm still making less money than I need to make. And it's an election year, so that doesn't bode well. So, like I said, I would revisit this again at the end of January, but at least, it's close to my bare minimum of the amount of money I would make. The views are up. The membership is up. People are getting recommended notifications. So to keep that momentum going, please subscribe, resubscribe when they unsubscribe you. Hit both notification buttons. And then leave comments. Do whatever you got to do to let YouTube know that you're interested in my channel. Like the video. That's another big thing. Liking the video is a good way to get more, to have then continue to send out notifications to you. And then, of course, the membership program as well. And so, having said that, there's a comment to the previous video that was entitled Kamala hilariously Kamala hilariously picks an old Biden-like white guy for VP and much more. And so this person who had a vegan in their name, I've yet to block them, but I have the comment here on my phone. It must be hard. You must be hard up for material. Hilariously picks Biden-like white guy. So anyone who's white and male over 60 and has white hair is a hilarious Biden-like guy. By the way, how old are you again, Romano? About the same age as Walsh, isn't it? You know, it's funny when people think they get you. And like they totally don't. So you didn't understand the title at all. Did you ever accuse somebody of something and you were completely wrong and you felt really stupid and embarrassed? Well, that's not this person, because I doubt this person will feel stupid and embarrassed. There's lots of people like this. Trump is somebody like this. Kamala, all these politicians. People who accuse somebody of something, they lash out and are butthurt or hurt about something. And then when they hear from the person gives them a reasonable explanation, very calmly and reasonably explains to them, well, you're off base here. None of those things are true, and you misinterpreted what I was saying. There's no reason for you to be upset or butthurt. The person just gets angrier because now they've been told they're wrong on top of everything else, and now they know they're wrong. Instead of dealing with their fact that they suck and they made a big mistake and, apologizing and, sticking their tail between their legs and actually feeling some remorse and regret, embarrassment, and all the feelings you would feel from such a, mistake on your part, they just go in attack mode and they find some other way to, demonize you or bitch at you or whatever, or just say that you're lying and they're right, you're wrong, and they're interpreting your feelings correctly and your intentions and what you're saying. One of the reasons I do these comment videos is I know that these people who leave these comments, because a comment that should never be left, right? It's silly and wrong on every level, and I'm going to dissect it, and you're going to be like, yeah, you're right, and that person's a piece of crap, because that's the case. But this person's like this for all the other people that they have in their life. And I don't know this person. I don't know if there's a man or a woman. The person seems to be maybe vegan and maybe a QB and possibly a flat earther as well, so it's like one of those people, right? I'm going just by the name of the person. So, they got a lot going on. But this person's going to be like this with everyone in their life, right? And they'll constantly be doing this behavior. And it sucks to tell people they suck when you know them, right? Like when, it's just better to avoid confrontation with people like this because they're never going to get it. Because very rarely do you say to somebody, oh, wow, you really suck. And they go, oh, yeah, you're right. I really do suck, right? And so in some cases, the person's almost over the edge and like maybe they're miserable and suicidal, or you can like push somebody over the edge when you give them a big dose of truth about how bad they suck. And then other people, most people, they just deny it because people who really suck are completely unaware of how other people perceive them. And when they get that kind of feedback, they can't handle it because, they really suck, right? When people who really suck can't be told they really suck because otherwise they'd stop sucking on their own. They wouldn't need it, right? And so this is a rare opportunity, but I don't know the person, don't see them. And I get to, tell them how they suck and they're, at least it's out there for them, right? Because the people around them are just trying to appease them or, run away from them as much as possible because they can't deal with the person because they really suck. And unfortunately, there's lots of people like this. So let's go through the comment again. Let me pull it up here. So the first part where the person says, you must be hard up for material. Well, that is not the case. I am constantly, people send me good stuff that I can't use or don't have the time to use, or, I have a video now sitting up on my other channel and I don't know when I'm going to release it because it's just, these channels are, I'm putting out too much content, right? And I have to kind of put that out just to keep my channel afloat. There's a whole thing there. But I can make videos much longer than I do. I could include a lot more. And so I'm not hard up for material. Look at the world. Like I'm not, it's perfect for my everything that I do here. Right? So that is if you know how much stuff I put out there, what I do here is like a radio show. The old-fashioned radio shows where people would have 3 hours of material. I don't play music or anything like this, talk radio. But, I have, without having any guests, I have, hours worth of material every day. New jokes, new perspectives, and I could always talk more about spirituality. I mean, I always have something to talk about, right? And I'm simultaneously making content on my other channels and things like that. So, no, that's not the case at all. Like, there's never been a day where, there's very seldom, like, oh, there's nothing for me to say, right? Usually it'd be a holiday or something. But usually there's something for me to talk about, even if it isn't going on in world events. I can, talk about just God and spirituality. I can talk about my, what's going on with my life. I have so many video clips on my phone of my farm and things that are going on and, that I just never get to deal with. So the answer is no. That's completely wrong. So you're wrong, and you could know you're wrong, but you didn't even think your way through this before you said it. And then the person writes, hilariously picks Biden-like white guy, because that's what I said in the title. So anybody who's white and male over 60 has white hair is hilariously Biden-like guy. Just a random guess, that's what you look like, baby? Is that what you look like, bro? Is that why you're so butthurt and offended? Because that's what you look like? But here's the thing, right? So I think most of the rest of you guys kind of get this. And I think I said in the video, but if I didn't, this is what I meant by that. Because it wasn't about the guy's color of his skin. I don't give a, boop about any of that stuff, right? What I was saying is the Democratic Party is supposed to be the party of inclusion, right? They're also supposed to be the party of the youth. The Republican Party is the party of old white guys and Anglo-Saxon, real white guys, right? Not, any of these different sort of things. Like Joe Biden was a Catholic and Irish, and that's innovative for politics. It used to be Catholic, like when Kennedy got elected as a Catholic and an Irish guy, the English people looked down on the Irish and the Italians. I'm part Irish and Italian, right? These things. Now, I didn't grow up with that. Maybe a little bit that I really, it didn't affect me. I didn't notice it, but I was aware of it. And my dad grew up with that, right? My dad had 2 Jewish friends in his college in Rutgers because they were all considered, like dirty people or less thans, right? And so you had the Anglo-Saxon, like English people who were, the dominant people in America. And then there was all these other groups of various European white people. And so, people don't realize the differences between all these different places and people and the way they look. I was just watching a little bit of the American volleyball game against the Italians, right? Italian people look a lot different than, say, the Swedish people or these other people, right? But what I was saying was that the Democratic Party is supposed to be about youth and diversity. And so what they do is they pick Joe frickin' Biden, who was old. He's got his weird racist stuff. He's got his weird... And also it was a time of Me Tooing people, right? It was a time where men were getting Me Too'd left and right. And they picked a guy who was the walking poster child for being a Me Too guy. And then all these other things that went along with it, right? And so, they had to have this guy. They didn't go with Kamala. They didn't go with Cory Booker. They didn't go with Andrew Chang. They didn't go with any of the other women on the panel, Tulsi Gabbard. All these people who are, ethnically different. They didn't go with Pete Buttigieg, the gay guy, right? They didn't go with Bernie Sanders, the Jewish socialist. They didn't go with Elizabeth Warren, the liberal socialist, right? They didn't go with any of those people, a woman and, and at least, the Native American liberal socialist, right? They had all this diversity up there. Pretty much every candidate was more diverse. Every candidate was more diverse than Joe Biden, and they were all much younger than him. But they went with a guy who was an establishment piece of crap politician. And he picked a woman of color who was, supposed to bring in diversity, and she's not really because of who she is as a person and who she wants to be and the people she hobnobs with, right, all this stuff. But there was no diversity from Joe Biden, and there was no youth, and the guy was a Me Too walking nightmare. And so Kamala Harris has some choices. I forget what the other guy's name, but we know about Josh Shapiro, right? Genocide Josh, who was Jewish, and he was kind of the rock star. And she was going to announce for him, which I get into in the this last video. She was going to announce for him. That's why she did it in Philadelphia. And he had to give a speech when he was picked, someone else was picked over him, right? Like he had to get up and give a speech introducing this guy when Josh Shapiro has a lot more energy. He's a lot more like Bernie Sanders. He has a lot of the ability to bring energy into the situation. But they picked an old white guy like Joe Biden. And he looks like him. And he's got that, no malarkey stuff going on. He's not as old as Joe Biden. But he looks a lot older than 60, right? But what makes it funny is it's the hypocrisy of their party. They claim to be about youth. They claim to be about all these things. And they picked an old white guy, traditional old white guy, right? He's got the, National Guard stuff. He was a principal. Is there anything more white than a white balding guy that's principal of a school and he gets into politics, right? Like this is just old white guy kind of, Republican kind of stuff, right? And they're hoping this guy was going to be a safe guy, all these other things. But he wasn't. He's now, they're dissecting this guy. He's got all kinds of problems out there. The whole thing's hilarious because they're not that party. Because, the last guy they got was a white guy, right? They had Barack Obama, who was, a biracial person. He wasn't really just African American. He was raised mostly by his white mother and his white grandparents, right? His father disappeared when he was younger. And he had he had an Indonesian stepfather. But he was, he was part of the establishment from an early age, just like Kamala Harris is, right? So they're all like, just because they have different color skin, they're all the same, right? They all have the same orientation. They're all selfish. They all have the same personality types. They're all posers. They're all these things, right? And so the Democratic Party, though, is trying to be different, and they're not. And that's my point. That's why it's hilarious. And that's why your comment sucks, and you didn't know what the F I was even talking about. And you leave a little pissy, little obnoxious comment because you suck as a human being, right? This is you not getting it. And instead of being like, oh, my God, this person's right, I shouldn't have said that. Like I should have thought about it before I wrote the comment, but people like this never do. And so the other part of the comment that's about me being old is this part here where the person says, by the way, it was a second comment. Like they realized, they felt they were so good and they were nailing me so good that they had another part here. But by the way, how old are you again, Romano? About the same age as Walsh, isn't it? I said that. I looked it up and I'm like, look at this old guy. He looks a lot older than I do. And I realized we were both born in the year 1964, as is Kamala. And if you see me, like people see me, would never think we're the same age, right? Like Kamala, me, and this guy are all the same age. And I'm not, trying to be young. Like I'm not, whatever. Like I'm not running away from my age. Like I said a long time ago, like I was running one day and I'm like, wow, I'm running like an old fat guy. And I'm like, well, and so I've accepted it. I'm not, I'm not trying to be young. I'm not trying to be any of these things, right? But it wasn't about him being old and white. And the thing was about the whole hypocrisy of the Democratic Party. At the end of the day, they went with the safest pick, and that's an old white guy, right? And all the presidents are old white guys, and all these politicians are old white guys. And they've had a few women and one person of color, now two people of color, in terms of the presidential politics and a little bit more in the Senate. But for the most part, it's old white guys. And they can say whatever they want, but when push comes to shove, they run back to old white guys because that's what America trusts and America will vote for. And, their rhetoric is just a bunch of BS. All right, with that in mind, I got a bunch of cool stuff to get, a bunch of funny memes here to start off with, and a bunch of other things that are already, popping today, and I'm sure there'll be more coming in the next couple of days. A married man bought her a BMW because she earned it. There's Kamala with that guy Brown, the political kingmaker in San Francisco, California, great state of California. Nobody in the 70s partied harder than Alice Cooper and Edith Bunker. Right? You older people will get that reference. July 13th. Huh? July 19th. What? July 26th. And there it is. We have more on that coming, right? Because, it's the gift that keeps on giving here. The only really good thing that I foresee coming out of a Trump presidency, for sure, was how upset this guy and other people on liberal media will be. Other than that, there might be some good things, but this is the only sort of guarantee. We guarantee these guys' heads will explode if Trump wins, except they're kind of accepting and preparing for it now.
When Donald Trump was asked a good question by NBC's Garrett Haake. Question: would you direct the FDA to revoke access to mifepristone? Here is what Donald Trump said to that yes or no question, which no matter how many times you read this answer, is not an answer.
It's not an answer.
Trump: sure, you could do things that would supplement, absolutely. And those things are pretty open and humane. But you have to be able to have a vote. After all, all I want to do is give everybody a vote. And the votes are taking place right now as we speak. But it's there are many things on a humane basis that you can do outside of that, but you also have to give a vote, and the people are going to have to decide. The world.
You mad, bro? It's the hammer guy throwing it down. That's what he did when he did the hammer thing.
Demanding to know, where's Nancy? Stop the hammering out there. Who's got a hammer? Where is it?
I don't know.
Where's the hammer? Is it on go up on the other floor? Somebody go up there and stop the hammering. Stop the hammering. Call Griffin. I don't care who the to call. Stop the hammering. Empty out the goddamn control room and find out where this is going on. It's either there, or out there somewhere. Out of control. Jesus Christ. Crazy sound coming in my ear. This stupid hammering. I told you why I wanted those words cut. It just sucks. It sucks to be out here with this out of control. Any thing can come into my ear at any moment. These things. How do you say this guy's last name? Demanding to know, where's Nancy? Words Donald Trump spoke to those reporters in response to that clear, simple, and important yes or no question were an insult to everyone in that room, and they took the insult. Nothing in those words was.
Are you serious? Because you were pushing this guy, Joe Biden, who couldn't complete a sentence for the past 5 years.
Was an answer, nothing. Donald Trump did not answer questions today. Don't let anyone tell you that lie, that Donald Trump answered questions. He did not. He never does. Anyone who tells you that Donald Trump answered reporters' questions is lying to you.
Okay, so you're saying that Kamala and Biden do? Like, it's silly. Just say the whole political system. This is the freedom I have. I don't have a horse in this race, right? The freedom I have because I've accepted what's happening to the system, or I've accepted what the system is and its inevitable end. I mean, as much as I can. Like, we all have our issues with it, right? I mean, the idea of it is I've accepted it, and then there's just dealing with it when it happens, right? And so, it's these people and Trumpers and everyone else who has an invested interest in one thing or another and pretending that the system can go on and being in denial, then they don't have the freedom to accept what's right in front of them, right?
And anyone who tells you that is not smart enough to know what an answer is. Donald Trump is not smart enough to answer questions. Anyone who then tells you that Kamala Harris has to answer questions from reporters because Donald Trump already answered questions from reporters is lying to themselves and to you. And
why won't she answer questions from reporters? Like, why don't you? I mean, you have viewers here that you're talking about. People are too stupid to know what an answer is. But why would she need Donald Trump to answer questions before she did? I mean, she's a brand new candidate who hasn't received a single vote, and her and Biden have been running away from the press for the past 5 years. Has fewer press conferences than any other president, and the ones that he had have been completely staged, where he's calling people by, he's got little note cards and calls specific people with rigged questions, prepared questions, and he still failed, right? And Kamala's not addressing any of this stuff, which she should. She needs to talk to the press. She's not doing it. They're hiding her away, and why? She's not senile, right? And so,
and you must not allow them to do it.
Okay, what are they going to do? What are they going? What power do they have? You don't have. What does that even mean?
Please crush them on social media when they do it, because they
crush them on social media, right? That's, like that's going to work. Like people are just talking shit on social media all the time. Crushing people on social media has no effect on anything, right? Like some people get broken, they get doxxed or whatever, but for the most part, it has no effect. I mean, it makes small individual people, sometimes celebrities, disappear, or just not want to be on the internet anymore. They don't die, right? Maybe there's a few times people have committed suicide because of harassment or something, and that's not what he's talking about here. But in terms of any of this other stuff, you think people are reading social media and they're choosing between Trump and Kamala, and your viewers, your 70-year-old viewers, are going to crush it on social media? I mean, his average age of its audience is like 70 years. So MSNBC's average age is 70 years old, right? And so, what are they going to do? What do you think these people are going to crush on social media? Okay, so this is from 2014.
Now to a woman named one of America's most powerful women by Newsweek magazine as San Francisco's first female African-American and Indian-American district attorney. Kamala Harris has received praise for...
Okay, so she was one of the most powerful people in the country, right? And this is not, I'm sorry, it's 14 years ago, so it's 2010. And so she was district attorney of San Francisco. So she was a national news person. She was someone who was being presented the nation as a potential somebody of the future, right? One of the most powerful women in the country. And he said she's African American and Indian. Now she's Jamaican, and there's a difference there, right? Because, when someone's an African American, the idea is that they were born in America, but they come from African descent, the descent of slaves. And, that's what you think about. I mean, that's what I understand the term to mean. And so people from these islands, I lived in the Virgin Islands, and I was there for about 3-4 months, and I waited tables. I worked the morning and lunch, which was horrible. I would have made a lot more money in the evening, but the manager of the morning wouldn't let me move to the nighttime because, I was one of the few people who was an American there, right? There's all these women from various islands, these island women, and the majority of them were black, from African descent, and they talk with a heavy island accent, and they were nothing like black people from America or black people from Africa, right? I mean, you think about going around the country in America, all the different accents, all the different types of people, state by state. And so there's huge differences between, even in India, there's like 500 different languages. And so saying she's Indian, well, she's Tamilian. She comes from the Tamil culture, and she's, a Brahmin, right? Her mom was a Brahmin. She comes from the Brahmin caste. So those are differences than someone from northern India or whatever it might be. And so to claim that she's African American, she's Jamaican, right? She's half Jamaican, and in her Jamaican heritage, she's half Irish, and then she's also half Indian. And so she's a fourth Jamaican, a fourth Irish. Her grandparents were slave owners, right? Her grandfathers, her great grandfather, and these things. A great grandfather. And so we know all this, and this is how she was being presented to people. But she wasn't that, right? That's not an accurate characterization of the kind of person she was. She was a hand-picked elite person from an academic family. Her parents were both professors and educated people and were amongst the elite class, right?
raising conviction rates against violent criminals while creating innovative programs to reduce crime and prevent repeat offenders. Now she's out with a new book called Smart on Crime, a career...
Smart on Crime, right? So they have smart right under her. And why would she be getting a book deal? So she did a bunch of things, which we'll get into in a moment, to promote herself, right? She's a player. You know, Donald Trump is a player. Donald Trump got his own TV shows. There's, you know, his apprentice shows. He was a celebrity. He made it into movies. He hobnobbed with celebrities. He was a part of a club. And so was Kamala, right? So Kamala, at 29, bangs this guy, Mayor Brown or whatever his name was, and he gives her a BMW and gives her a bunch of jobs. You know, he's a married man, leaves his wife, dates Kamala for 10 years. And, you know, again, the age gap, we know why she's dating him. And she found a way to move herself along her ambition. This is about her ambition. And become somebody who's on the Today Show, right? Now, how does she get on the Today Show when she's just a district attorney of one of, you know, not even the biggest city? She's not the district attorney of L.A. or some of these other big cities. She is, you know, San Francisco. Because she does all these programs and controversial things because she's promoting herself, right? She's going to go to Attorney General of the state and then to being a congresswoman and then to vice president and then now running for president without really ever doing anything other than promote herself, right?
Career prosecutors plan to make us safer. Kamala, good morning.
She just wants to make the world safer.
Nice
Good
to have
morning,
you
Matt.
here.
It's wonderful to be here.
Crime is something we think about every single day, whether you've been directly impacted by it or indirectly. We pay for it every single day in this country. And you think, in large part, we're going about...
Okay, so I don't think about... You know who thinks about every day is criminals, right? It's criminals.
Fighting it wrong. Why?
That's what people think about crime every day are criminals.
Well,
because it's their job.
First of all, as a career prosecutor, I can tell you that
She's a career prosecutor.
No question in my mind or in anyone's mind. Serious and violent crime, lock them up. We know that. And we know about serious and violent crime because it's on the front page of our paper every day in the legal...
Lock them up. Lock her up. Lock them up. Later on in this video, Trump is going to talk about how he protected Hillary and doesn't think Hillary should have went to jail because she's in a different level of other people, right? Which, you know, for Trumpers, it should be the death knell for Trump, but it won't be because they'll never leave the guy. But, you know, it's the same thing. Just different. Like she's trying to be a hard guy, and Trump is, you know, so is Trump on crime, but it only applies to certain people.
Story on the evening news.
So you don't differ from other people on that subject. It's on
not.
nonviolent crime where you differ.
Absolutely. If you look at crime, look at it on a pyramid. At the top of the
pyramid. Look at the top of the pyramid, the capstone where everybody gets away with everything, like Hillary and Trump.
Pyramid, serious and most violent crime. It's our priority, let's deal with it. But truly, it is the fewest number of crimes that are occupying so much space and so much money in our criminal justice system. And frankly, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach.
We just can't. We can't have one size. We can't give everyone life sentences. You know, prison is big business. There was a judge in Pennsylvania, and a couple of treatment centers opened, and maybe it was like juvie kind of, you know, lockdown treatment centers. And he was putting kids in there for small infractions, right? Like little small crimes and, you know, whatever it was, not even misdemeanors. And he was putting them in there because they paid him. He was taking kickbacks. Because this is big business, right? These prisons and these treatment centers. You know, I worked in a treatment center for sex offenders that, you know, I was a counselor. I have a master's in counseling, clinician. And the place was doing a horrible job, but it was making $9 to $11 million a year, and there are places like that all over the country, right? And so this is big business. And as long as it's big business, there'll be prisoners. They have to fill those prisons.
And that's why a lot of what I talk about in the book is let's bust the myths.
Let's bust them myths.
Over, you know, the idea that, for example, when we want to talk about criminal justice policy, we want tough talk and lock 'em up talk. Let's realize that the bulk of what we're dealing with is crime that is recidivist in nature. There's a revolving door around it, and we've got to get smarter around cycling people out.
Let's get smarter, cycling those people out and keeping them out.
Surprise some people by saying, you know what we should target? We should take a good, hard look at elementary school truancy.
Absolutely.
And other people say, wait a second, let's go to high school truancy because they're most likely to get...
Well, so we know this didn't work because right now in San Francisco, they have a 25% rate of a high truancy, right, of chronic truancy. And so it didn't work. It was 29% during COVID. So, I mean, 1/4 of kids are truant there. So it didn't help that at all. Her programs didn't help that at all. Like, she doesn't care about these people. She's building her career and her reputation on the backs of these people by trying innovative things, right? So I was talking about the guy Noah Lyles, and I forgot why he became known. And then I heard something about someone was talking about this thing he said, and then I remembered. He said that, like, the NBA, they call themselves world champions. They're not world champions. They're the best in the world, right? And it pissed off all these NBA players and these other athletes. But I heard about the guy, and so did so many other people. He put himself on the map. And so people will say outrageous things. It's the what Madonna used to do, or Lady Gaga, and do controversial things so people hear about your name. And she was on all these shows. She was interviewed on these shows. She ends up writing a book because she's using her position to promote herself. And she's putting parents in jail, suffering parents in jail, to promote herself. Like, it's all about Kamala. And you see this in her, right? This is who she is. I mean, Trump's the same way. He's different, but the same.
In trouble, you say no, let's go to the elementary schools. Why?
Let me tell you, I have seen in my city and throughout this country where we have large number of elementary school students who are literally missing 60 to 80 days of a 180-day school year. And as far as I'm concerned, a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime, and we need to treat it as seriously as we would any other issue, because invariably that kid will be the high school dropout who will be the crime victim and the perpetrator.
You've started another...
Okay, so it doesn't work, right? Yeah, truancy is a problem, but arresting the parents and putting the kids in foster care isn't the solution, right? And that's what was happening. So, yeah, it's a real problem, but they didn't come up with a solution. But she didn't care. She wanted to write a book. She wanted to be on Matt Lauer's show, right? She wanted to be on Today's Show.
Program is getting a lot of attention nationwide. You started it out there, but it's being copied nationwide, called Back on Track.
Right.
I'll paraphrase it. You jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. You get a young
what are you doing, Matt? Matt's an expert.
Offender. Yeah. They've committed a drug offense. They don't go to jail. They go to a boot camp for a year. They plead guilty.
Right.
They go through drug testing. They get a GED while they're in this program. And when they're finished with it, if they don't screw up, they get that felony conviction dropped, which allows them to go off and get a job easier.
So it didn't work. Here's an article here. Kamala Harris' signature achievement was a complete failure. And this is from 2019, when she was running for vice president. And so, and it's pretty well documented. It's not like a Republican hit piece here. But it says here, according to internal work documented from the DA's office, just 240 individuals completed the BOT program between 2007 and 2011, right? So this is her being interviewed about this in 2010, right? And it was already failing, but she doesn't care about it, right? She doesn't care how successful it was. It said individuals left without finishing, while those numbers raised some additional questions, like how many total individuals were in the program at any given time, and why the 2010-11 figure doesn't appear to add up. The figures do suggest the scale of the program, and it was very small. So they had 235 people in 2007, 2008. This is the total enrollment, right? So these are the amount of people that were enrolled. The people who self-withdrew was almost half of them, right? A high number self-withdrew. And then a higher number, a court terminated their being a part of it, and a very low rate. Less than half of them completed them, right? But then there's this. But when it came to reducing prison overcrowding, But when it came time to reduce prison overcrowding, the ostensible claim of the program, Harris's much-touted measures had virtually no impact. The inmate population at San Francisco jails actually grew during its run, and the state prison population reached new heights the year after its implementation. And so her programs didn't work. She didn't reduce the amount of people in prison, which was what her whole thing was about, right? She didn't reduce the amount of crime, And this program really didn't work at all.
And Back on Track, as an initiative, has proven over the course of 4.5 years to reduce the recidivism or reoffense rate for that population from 54% to less than 10%.
But not perfect program, and because you're...
Okay, so here's the thing, right? She's gaming the statistics there, because if somebody's in the program, is enrolled in the program, and they, whether they make it through or not, they're taken out of society for about a year. This happens to every kid that goes to juvie, every kid that goes to treatment centers. That was one of the problems with the treatment centers. Because in treatment centers, kids are assaulting and offending people all the time. But the police don't get involved. And so it stays within the treatment centers. Kids are engaging in criminal behaviors, and oftentimes they're medicated so heavily they can't do what they would tend to do, right? But sometimes they even are. But it's not documented, and so they go through the treatment center or the juvenile juvie or whatever it is, and they get released, and then all of a sudden they don't have any adult supervision, and they don't have any medication, and there's no, their record is expunged because they went to treatment instead of going to jail, and so there's no knowledge of this person who's already shown criminal behavior. I mean, they should have already been prosecuted for criminal behavior, and so they're left out on the street, and they're violent criminals who now have been around other criminals, and so they're even worse. The treatment didn't work. Their time in whatever juvie didn't work, and now they're like worse off, and they're like totally dangerous, and they've been put out on the streets, right? And so this is a kind of, you can claim that, well, these guys aren't doing any crimes, but they're locked up in this like boot camp or whatever she's calling it. So it's not accurate, right?
You're running for attorney general and you're raising a lot of money, they're targeting you. And one of the things your critics have dug up is that there were some illegal immigrants involved in that program who got their...
Yeah, of course there are. So look at her, right? Like, she is self-promoting. Now think about this. She was district attorney of San Francisco, running for attorney general of the state of California. And she was writing books and being promoted. They wanted her to have a seat at the table. She's being interviewed by Matt Lauer, who later would get Me Too'd himself, right? Think about all the states, Oregon, Washington State, New Mexico, Louisiana, some of these, still Montana, and Idaho, and all these things, the Dakotas. I mean, all these states around the country, Vermont, all these Maine, where you don't know the people who are senators. They've been senators for 30, 40 years, and you don't even know their names, right? They're not being interviewed by Matt Lauer, governors of these states. And she's a measly district attorney of San Francisco, not even the biggest state. And they're promoting her in her book here because she was one of the chosen ones. She was being chosen for all of these things, right? And, she knee-pad Harris her way into the door. That's how she got in the, she knee-padded it to get into the door, and then she promoted herself, and she's ambitious, and she built her career on the pain and suffering of other people and these bogus programs that are just there to promote. They're there for self-promotion.
Okay, so it's Sunday, August 11th. I'm going to put the video up today and probably make it public tomorrow. Some stuff has happened, too, as well, yesterday. There's two as well. The Fetterman, as well, too. Trump got hacked, so we'll get into that a bit. There's an Olympic update with some girl gymnast losing her medal. And there's some 666 stuff coming up. Beetlejuice and the Olympics. And, all these things. Like, there's just always developing things every day. But the thing with Kamala here, they always say, like Joe Biden did 50 years of service, and they call this service, these politicians. And Kamala's doing such great service, right, in these programs that she's created and things like that. But, these programs are self-promoting. That's why she's writing books about it. And these people who end up in the public eye in national politics, they do acts of what appears to be service only for self-promotion. So it's not like the programs have any like heart or God in them or any, real intention. They're just, smoke and mirrors so they can have these signature, whatever it is, right? Service type of things. And you can tell by how she is and how Trump is and all these people that it's all about self-promotion and say, look what I did. Like Trump, when he gives a speech or Biden gives us, we just talking, they talk about all the things they did and how great they were and how great it was when they were, doing it and how bad it was when the other guy was doing it. And, there's all these things that are just about bragging. Like it's the same thing with Walt saying, we got to take those guns off the street. We shouldn't be using guns that I used in war. These things, right? They're always bragging, and it's all about, these narcissistic rants they go on. But these programs, back when I was in the treatment centers, I worked in 2 different treatment centers. One was turned for kids who were sexually reactive. These were kids who were sexually offended, and then they acted out. And then years later, got married and got my master's degree, and I worked in another treatment center where I worked as a clinician, and now I was doing, therapy, counseling. The job before that, I worked what's called in the milieu, where you work as a counselor within the, you're like a substitute parent or like a babysitter in a sense, and you're in these cottages or these units or whatever they call them, right? And then there's these clinicians where the kids go to have therapy. And so it's a, higher paying job. And this was a place where there's teenage sex offenders. And it cost $110,000 a year. And this is back in, 2000 and, 3 or 2 and, back all the way back then, right? And to have one of these kids in these treatment centers. I don't know what the first treatment center was, but similar. So it costs a lot of money. It costs the taxpayers. Most of the kids were, these weren't kids who were, their parents paid for this or insurance. This was done by, these were kids who had been, convicted usually of a crime, some sort of, sexual crime, where there was a variety of ranges. So it could be, an underage girl, or it could be little kids, right? It could be any kind of, it's a wide range. But either the school system would be paid, or a social worker, or, the state, or, the kid that was convicted had a parole officer, and they would send him to this treatment center instead of sending him to jail or whatever. And the treatment center wasn't all that effective because the kids didn't want to change, right? And they, even though they were ashamed of this thing, most of them were ashamed of it, right? They had, deviant sexual tendencies, and like I said, it was a range of kids. But it costs a lot of money. And these programs they're talking about, the Kamala Harris boot camp, it's going to cost a lot of money. It has to be staff. There has to be people who cook the food. There has to be people who are supervising the kids. It's, the staff alone is very expensive. And then all the other aspects of it, right? In these treatment centers, there's therapists and all these other levels of, counseling professionals. And it's more expensive than prison. And prison's expensive, right? It costs taxpayers money to keep these people in these, since again, it's, some of these people shouldn't be in jail. I mean, it's just like there's, the whole system is money oriented, and these places are usually privately owned, and, private ownership of prisons. And so there's a whole thing, like it's a whole mess, right? And in all these treatment centers and outpatient counseling programs, I worked in all these things. I worked at these outpatient counseling programs as well. And, these people, many of them women, want to make the world a better place, right? They go into counseling thinking they can help other people. And I used to think that way. And now, of course, I don't think that way because people don't want to change. And you can't make other people change, right? And, I mean, it's just there in me, like some part of me is, there's some service element, like I want to help out a little bit, but let's, less and less in me now. Like whatever I do here that helps people, great, but it's really based in the people themselves who are looking to improve themselves, right? Like it's, it's not about me as much as about them, because there's lots of people who have wisdom or information or energy to offer. Of course, the Sajmark meditation that I do. And, it's a great system, but where can you find good, people who want to better themselves? Like there was a woman I worked with, an older woman,
and she had worked in an outpatient clinic, which was completely corrupt. What they would do is you had to book so many hours. And I interned in a place in Idaho that had the same system. And the counselors, you have to be more of a business person than a counselor. So booking hours, you get paid Medicaid, like Medicaid payments, which $45 an hour. Medicaid paid $45 an hour. And so whatever your salary was, or whatever it was for you, the place would take like 35. So you would maybe get 10, whatever it is, credit for. And you had to book all these hours of individual therapy. But these parents would bring these kids into the place once a month to see the psychiatrist so they could get their kids on medication. Like all these kids were on that ADHD medication. And you'd see the kid for an hour therapy session, but that was it. Like you wouldn't see that kid for a month or whatever until they had to see the psychiatrist, because the parents just wanted free medication because the kids were like, nightmares, and they were, hyper because they were eating crappy food and, living in horrible lives, right? And these kids, their parents were like the dregs of society, but not, at least they were still trying to be parents, right? And these kids were growing up eating the worst type of foods and being in the worst type of environments, And so the parents weren't big on therapy. And so you'd have all these kids on that would just cancel appointment after appointment. And so you then had to, supplement that by doing intakes, which were psychological evaluations, but there's only so many you could do. You got credit for 5, whatever it was, like some amount of hours to do that, to do the intake. And, Medicaid would pay for like 5 hours of your time. And inevitably, you wouldn't be able to meet your quota. Like you had to book 40 hours a week or whatever of, counseling time. And you wouldn't be able to do it. So they take your vacation time and, and it was usually like younger women this was their first job as a counselor, and they had self-esteem issues, and they were, easily bullied. Like I was talking to this, younger woman who had been working there, and she talked about the whole process and how depressed she was and all these things, right? So it was it's like a money-making scam where they're making money. Like real counseling wasn't happening because the parents weren't invested in therapy. Like this is for kids, but there's other outpatient clinics that for, whatever it is, right? And there are people who, they really can't show up for therapy. Like I had this one kid who took 2 buses. He got himself into therapy, and he took 2 buses to get there. He was a high school kid, and he was in a bad situation. This is in sort of a depressed Massachusetts city. He he was being pressured to like sell drugs, or being like whatever kind of gangs they had there. He was in the ROTC program. He was going to be in the military. His sister was working and being competent, but his mom was a crackhead, and his older sister came in with him, and and she was young. She seemed like she was in her 20s, but she looked younger. And this kid was only like 15, and they're confronting their 40-year-old crackhead mom who's really skinny, and they're kind of angry at her, but like she's just crack. She's addicted to crack, right? She's nothing. She was she's lost a bunch of her teeth, and she was a black woman. His dad was a Scottish white guy, because he told me that he saw his mom pointed him out one day. I said, "That's your dad over there." So he was a biracial kid, and he got himself into therapy all by himself, and was able to get there. And he came to every session, right? Like he was probably the best client I ever have in terms of like my memory. He was the most motivated, client, and whatever. But it's very rare you have somebody like that, right? In those situations. And so there was an older woman there, and she not only had done counseling for years, and she was in this, this outpatient clinic, and she saw how sucky it was, but she had her, she had been there and had built up level of the place itself would reward people like they do with salespeople with, better potential clients, right? And she was a lifer. She had been there for 30, 40 years. But she had also done foster care. And she was telling me about how her and her husband were
they really loved doing foster care, but the system now was wrecking it, right? The system was making the good people leave foster, and they were getting people who were criminals and, abusers and things like that. And she was being forced out to do it. And, then they would investigate these foster parents who were good, and they were, the whole system was like turning evil, And so what I'm saying here is there's people who want to do service. And I've known people like this in the counseling world and, through the spiritual organization that I, been a part of, who just really want to make the world a better place. There's some part of them that wants to give back. There's people like that who are generous. They have, some love to give. Not so many anymore, but, they start off like that. And there's people who enter into politics like that. And those people, they'll just do the work, and they're not looking for glory. They're not looking to have their face on a book that says, smart underneath their, face and picture to make them look smart, and, the self-promotion and these things, right? And that's why, people like Donald Trump and Kamala and all these other people, Walsh and J.D. Vance and these people like J.D. Vance writing a book, they want to be somebody, right? They want to be seen as a service-oriented person, but they're really vampires. They really take energy from people. They're not servants. They're not people who are serving God or serving their brothers and sisters. They're self-promoting, and they just use up as many resources as possible. They want to, live a great life on the government, on the taxpayer, expense. And, they get into these, and, they might start off being a service-oriented person, but the system is so corrupt, they, turn into one of these ghouls that just sucks energy off of other people in the system, vampires, and their narcissism and their whole thing. And so that's why you're never going to have a good politician, because that's how the system is, right? It's for sociopaths and people with narcissistic or borderline personality disorder or something like that, who need to be propped up by everybody else, right? Okay, so they're covering Kamala Harris's campaign a little bit more negatively than they did Joe Biden, which should be a concern that they are picking Trump, right? Or indication that they're picking Trump.
Kamala Harris is on a multi-state battleground swing. In just a few hours, Donald Trump says he will be holding a press conference in Mar-a-Lago. Now, we haven't seen much of the former president this week, and he has one rally on his schedule. That is tomorrow in Montana. But his running mate has been out and about, and he's sharpening attacks on Vice President Harris and her new running mate, Tim Walz, especially over his 24-year career in the Army National Guard.
When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him. He said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone?
Wait, some of that's an exaggeration, right? Like, they didn't care about this a week ago or 2 weeks ago before he was the vice president. But now they're picking at everything. Like, this is how it goes, right? But he did say that, I don't know if I have that quote. He's given a speech and he's bragging about the weapons he used when he was in war. He was in the National Guard, right? And he withdrew before he went to Iraq. And I don't care. Like, that doesn't bother me. But he's acting like he's acting like he was a big tough guy, right?
Vance is a Marine veteran who served as a combat correspondent in Iraq. His accusation that Walz is not telling the truth is based in part on this clip posted by the Harris campaign of Walz advocating for gun control.
We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
It's the braggadocious nature of politics. Like, they're always bragging, right? They're always trying to claim something they didn't. But, that guy, Brian Williams from NBC, got fired for saying he was in a helicopter that received fire, that's received, bullets were flying through the helicopter when he was in it, and he wasn't even in the helicopter, right? Never mind being shot at. And he got fired from his anchor position. He was getting good ratings because he was out, bragging like this guy. as a news media person. And so what's the consequence for this guy? Because they've already had to amend his statements, the Harris campaign.
So weapons of war that I carried in war. How close was he to war? A National Guard spokesman says Walz deployed to Italy in 2003, where he was part of a security mission in support of the Afghanistan war, but he never served in Afghanistan. In a statement, the
He went to Italy. Come on.
campaign said, quote, in his 24 years of service, the governor carried, fired, and trained others to use weapons of war innumerable times. Governor Walz would never insult or undermine any American's service to this country. In fact, he thanks Senator Vance for putting his life on the line for our country. It's the American way.
It's the American way. Well, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't put your life on your line for this country, right? Because it isn't for the country. It isn't for, they say it's for your family, but it's not. It's for these wealthy people, and it's for a corrupt system. You're throwing your life away for these people who, that they're not superior to you. They don't deserve it, right? But, like it is the American way to talk about it this way, but it's not a good American way, right? So then they double down here.
Questions about his military record, accusations that he may have embellished that record.
Well, that's right. He faced similar accusations during his first race for Congress in 2006 when critics alleged that the way that his campaign talked about his service gave a misleading impression.
So he already had this happen to him, and he went out again and claimed he fired weapons in a war zone, and he didn't. I mean, he had this when he ran for whatever Senate or whatever he was questioned before. And he didn't smarten up enough to realize he shouldn't say that in his speech. Just couldn't help himself. They talk about Donald Trump bragging, and Donald Trump is one of the worst braggers. But,
that he had served in the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan while served in Italy supporting the operation.
Serving in Italy is not the same as Iraq, right?
in Afghanistan. Now,
I mean,
Walz,
he had, there was one day he ate like 6 or 7 cannolis and he got sick. It was horrible.
Had to put out multiple statements to newspapers responding to basically letters to the editor that people wrote accusing him of misleading his service. And I'm going to read a couple of the quotes for people of what people were saying about.
So this has happened before. The important thing is that CNN isn't covering up some of this stuff for Harris. I mean, they're not pushing the way they should. They're not attacking her like they were when Joe Biden was senile. They were trying to get rid of him. But they're certainly not covering up for her the way they do it for Joe Biden, which is a bad sign for her because, she's in a losing position. Harris softens Biden's dark warnings about the state of democracy for a more joyful message. Harris is focused on the care economy and how she would help make providing for children and elderly more affordable. And so here it is about them raising money. Gone are Joe Biden's dark warnings about the life and death stakes for American democracy. Well, that's kind of what worked for him, right? Instead, Kamala Harris talks intimately about protecting abortion rights and capping drug costs, lowering inflation, and boosting the middle class. Well, that's not going to win you. I mean, if Donald Trump isn't horrible, then why would you not have him? In terms of, you're trying to, she's not going to get people enthusiastic about her. And so, this isn't going to work. Fuming cop caught on video saying he told Secret Service days before to secure a roof where Thomas Crooks opened fire at Donald Trump. I effing told them. Yeah, he did. But, now this is just coming out. This is a fairly new article from August 9th, yesterday. And so, this story has disappeared. It's disappeared because it's fake. It's disappeared because the only one talking about it is Trump and right-wing, people here. But here's all you need to know about Trump, right? So this is part of his press conference.
Yeah, please.
President Biden has vowed not to pardon his son Hunter, who is now a convicted felon and facing more felony charges in his upcoming trial for alleged tax evasion. Would you consider granting clemency or a pardon?
I don't think it's appropriate for me to talk about it. I think it's a tragic story. You want to know the truth. And I felt that with Hillary Clinton, too.
It's a great story. It's a success story. Hunter Biden's the world's greatest crack addict, right? He executed his ability to smoke crack in so many different ways. He was able to function, use his dad's influence, use his dad's power and his access to his dad. He became a best-selling artist, right? I mean, he just became a painter, and he sold like over $1 million in paintings. The guy's he just gets it. He's just a success.
With Hillary Clinton, I could have done things to her that would have made your head spin.
Oh my God, don't talk about that. That's gross.
I thought it was a very bad thing. Take the wife of a president of the United States and put her in jail. And then I see the way they treat me. That's the way it goes. But
that's not the way it goes, Donald. Okay, so I'm editing this. This is Sunday, August 11th. And I had a lot of thoughts about this, this short little clip here. Lots of them, because it's so telling. And, the Trumpers are just so oblivious. There's nothing that this guy could do for them to face reality, right? But he's saying this because there is this unwritten rule. You don't go after the other person. Like the presidents don't go after each other. They're all in a presidential club, and these people who are in this, they're all scamming everybody. They're all scamming the people. The congressmen, the senators, the national politicians, and all the people that are involved in this club. And they go after each other, and it's limited to, public discourse and debates and things and, sound bites, but they never go after somebody criminally. Like they pretend they are, lock her up like Trump did. And he could have went after Hillary Clinton because she committed crimes, right? Just like he committed crimes. But they didn't go after her. And then they went after him, right? But that's, they never really went after him. And maybe, whatever, he doesn't know that, because he's just being worked and he's being handled and being wound up because that it makes an effective, it works for them to keep him in the dark of how he's being treated or being handled he's an asset and he doesn't know he's an asset, right? But he's basically pissed off, not because he really wanted to lock Hillary up or that she committed crimes, but that he gave her a pass and Biden and, his team didn't, right? And so that's what this is about. And we've seen this before. This is not the first time he's talked about this.
I was very protective of her. Nobody would understand that. But
you were very protective of Hillary Clinton?
I think my people understand it.
They don't understand it. You know why? This was your biggest moment in your debate. This is by far your best moment.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
Boom. That was a great moment. That was a wonderful moment, right? And that was his second debate. He kind of quit in the third debate. He seemed to just give up. He realized it was just, it had been a publicity stunt all along. He was just willing to, take it for what it was worth. And then all of a sudden he was president, and that changed everything for him. And he started feeling the love of the crowd and these things and the enthusiasm, and it really, he started to believe his own bullshit and all this stuff, right? But his supporters were yelling, lock her up at all his rallies, and he said, yeah, that's great, we'll do that. And then I showed you the clip over and over again where he said, no, that played well before the election. And now he's saying he's protected her. He said this before. He protected her. He's saying he protected her. Now, he didn't protect her because the Justice Department and no one else was going after her. What he protected her from was himself and his rabid people who were pushing him, his voters, his supporters were pushing him to lock her up, right? But he chose not to do it because you don't do that. That's what he's saying. Because these people live by a set of rules and standards, privileges that you don't have, right? Even though they both have broken the law, and both of them should be in jail, and all presidents and politicians should be in jail, and the atrocities that they've created one way or another, right, in terms of whether they're legal or not, but the pain and suffering they've caused to other people based in their policies, based in their war, based in their support of the military-industrial complex, based on their support of the intelligence community, they should all be in jail, right? They're horrible people. Like, they're the worst type of criminals.
But I was very protective of her. Nobody would understand that, but I was. I think my people understand it. They used to say, lock her up, and I'd say, just relax, please. We won the election.
Your people don't understand, right? Because before, you encourage them to say lock her up, which we know has been well documented. The last time he, said all this drivel he's saying here. But afterwards, you said, well, that played well before the election. And these people thought you were going to lock her up. They really wanted to see Hillary Clinton in jail. And lots of them, right? The QBs and all these people. And so, like, he's just rearranging reality here. I mean, when you said to her she'd be in jail if you were running, like you were president, the people who want to see her in jail were like, oh my God, he's really going to put her in jail. And then you bailed on that like you always do. You told people what they wanted to hear. You knew what they wanted to hear. And you went along with it, but you didn't believe it. And you had the opportunity, like you're saying here, he's going to talk about how she did bad things and that he could have put her in jail, but he chose not to. He protected her.
I think it would have been horrible for our country and we had her between the hammering of all of the files. And don't forget, she got a subpoena from the United States Congress. And then after getting the subpoena, she destroyed everything that
she committed felonies is what you're saying. She committed felonies and she should be in jail. And you said you were going to be you locking other people up, right? You're big into that, right? You're big into the criminal justice stuff. You're hard on crime, and you let Hillary Clinton go. Why? Why does she deserve special treatment? Because you gave her money? Because you guys were butt buddies? Like, why?
Supposed to get. I thought it was so bad to take her and put her in jail.
No, the criminal justice system works in a certain way. Works in a way where somebody is investigated, which she was, and people know that she committed a crime, which they did. And I mean, this isn't just finding hidden crimes that people don't know about. This is a crime that was committed out in the open, multiple crimes by the Clintons, all these indictments, all these QBs that think that there's all these sealed indictments and Trump is going to get rid of the deep state, right? This is deep state shit right here. And Trump is protecting her, in his words, right? And he had her, and he could put her in jail, but he chose not to. And this is your guy. You believe in this guy, right? His, this fake thing with his ear and all this stuff. You believe in any of this stuff? It's not real. He's a liar. He's a piece of shit, right? Because he's lying to you. He played upon your emotions. He knew what you wanted to hear. He went with it. And then he decided, no, it's just not worth it because it's worse for me. I know what you guys want, but I don't think it's good for me to lock her up. Because if I lock her up, maybe they'll lock me up, right? And that's what he's thinking.
The wife of a president of the United States, and then when it's my turn, nobody thinks that way. I thought it was a very terrible thing.
Well, they tried to lock up Melania.
She did a lot of very bad things. I'll tell you what, she was pretty evil. But in terms of the country...
So then why not put her in jail? Why should other people suffer in jail when, like, Hillary Clinton and people like that get away with things? That's not how the system works. It's not up to you to decide. You're not supposed to be there deciding who gets, in jail, who gets to get a free pass from you're not handing out get out of jail free cards.
In terms of unifying the country, bringing it back, to have taken her and to have put her in jail, and I think you know the things as well as I do. There were some pretty bad acts that she did. I think it would have been very bad for our country, and a lot of my people, a lot of the
It's not bad, it's just what needs to happen. Okay, so I want to replay this because, again, today is this Sunday, whatever it is, August 11th. And, I watched this and did this, I'm editing what you from yesterday, what you're seeing now, what you just saw. But now I'm, in the present, in your past, when you see this on Monday. But in my future, from when I copied this on Tuesday. And so, Saturday. And so I thought a lot about this part because I didn't say anything. There's so much to comment on here. But this is a huge piece right here.
I'll tell you what, she was pretty evil. But in terms of the country and in terms of unifying...
So first, she was pretty evil.
Let's watch that again. So saying that she was pretty evil, but he chose not to put her in jail. So here's why, right? Here's his excuse for why. What he's really upset about is that they, what I already said, that they didn't give him a pass the way he gave her a pass. Like, this is the people in the club who don't give each other a pass. Of course, nobody gives the people in the, who are below them a pass, right? Like, they're all locking up every other, common criminals. But these people who do real damage and are real, real big-time evil criminals here, and the political criminals, they give each other a pass, right? But him saying this here.
She was pretty evil. But in terms of the country and in terms of unifying the country, bringing it back.
When have you ever wanted to unify the country? Like, he's saying that he didn't want to be divisive. You hear what this motherfucker just said? He didn't want to be divisive, right? He's the most divisive person. He's the most, if you're not with me, you're against me. And this is going back to when he was on The Apprentice show, right? When he was on when he was hosting The Apprentice. And he would have these people, he would pit these people against each other. And he liked to see them go after each other in the boardroom. And he liked to see people fight. And he'd be like, oh, she's killing you. Some woman would get all bitchy and go off on some guy. And, he really liked that. Like when women were giving it to the guys. And he's like, oh, you're getting killed right now, right? And he likes these, like, adversarial, middle of the night Twitter battles and things he had, like with Rosie O'Donnell. He talked about how that, that guy Branson from Virgin Airlines and Mark Cuban both had their own billionaire shows. And he goes, they came after me and I killed them. And they weren't at the same time slot, right? They weren't going after him in the same time slot. They were just billionaires who had their own reality show. And he said they were going after him. He took it personally. And like they were, trying to steal his idea of The Apprentice. And they had their own things, right? And it was a little bit like Mark Cuban. Like Mark Cuban, he had two people who he was going to get rid of one of them. And he had them decide it by playing Jenga, right? Like Mark Cuban's show was an absolute joke. But he brought them out to the basketball court, his apprentices, and he said, "This is my boardroom." So I mean, it was like the whole thing, a knockoff of Donald Trump. His show failed miserably, as did Branson's show. But he takes things personally, and he's the most petty person, and everything is you're either with him or against him, and he's been so divisive, right? And he's embraced extremist groups, and like you Republicans, you Trumpers won't admit it, but he's done that. In fact, my wife was talking to a person, an old friend who really liked Trump, and she was so pissed off at him for just, not, just conceding some of these points about some of these accusations he had. But he's the most divisive person we've seen in politics because of his personality, and he provokes people all the time. And I've liked that in him because I like to see these people provoked. But still, he's divisive. It's like a fact. And the Trumpers will never admit it because they can't. But, he deserves all the stuff he's getting. Everything that he's getting back is because he provoked people. Like, he's just that guy that just, he brings out ire and hatred and anger in people. Like, he just provokes them. He's provocative, right? This is who he is, and he's divisive. He's the most divisive. And so for him to pretend that he wanted to unify the country, that's why he did it. Like, he didn't go after Hillary because he wanted to unify the country. He didn't go after Hillary because it didn't serve him anymore. When he talked about her when he's running for, as a president, it's the same thing he said about DeSantis. He said, I'm making fun of DeSantis now because he's the front runner. But if it's somebody else, and it was, Hickey Nally later on, he went after her. And he just makes up whatever attacks and does whatever he says and lies and does whatever he does, the total Trumpian way, because he's that guy. He's divisive. He likes to make it an all or nothing thing, right? It's like, you're the devil. No, you're the devil, right? And so, he brings up crooked Hillary from time to time, but he had a chance to put crooked Hillary in jail, but he doesn't believe in the criminal justice system. He doesn't believe in due process. He believes in whatever's best for Trump. He doesn't believe in,
and fulfilling his promises and obligations to his voters and things that he said he was going to do. He believes in Trump, and he's always been this way.
To have taken her and to have put her in jail, and I think you know the things as well as I do. There were some pretty bad acts that she did.
So he could have put her in jail. He didn't, right? And so, but to put her in jail would be divisive. But she did some pretty bad acts. She did. You know, just he's a horrible person, right? Because he's betraying the people that are trusting him. And, you know, he's lying to them about locking her up and, you know, and wanting to lock her up. And, you know, just like this is who he is. So he doesn't believe in the things you believe in. He knows what you believe and tells you he's the same way. But he believes in himself. He believes in, you know, like this WWE moment. He loves the crowd loving him, right? So he says the things that's going to make them love him. But then when he deals with the power brokers and the people who make the decisions in reality, he's like, all right, we can't do that. And he just says, you guys understand, right? We had that great moment at the rally where you guys were yelling, lock her up, and you felt pumped, and you guys were all aroused, and I was aroused, and we were like, and you know, that fake thing when I pretended to get shot in the air and I was pumped my fist, and you know, you guys got all your patriot boners on, right? But, you know, it wasn't real, right? It was just, you know, it was a moment of passion or whatever it is, because my ear like is completely fine, and you know, everything's bullshit. Like I'm just a liar and a bullshitter. And you guys just will never see it, you know. But you just want somebody to tell you what you want to hear because it makes you feel good for the moment. But we're all fucked, and the country's collapsing. So, you know, Trump might as well get some Trump, right? I might as well get some Trump for myself. Trump might as well Trump his way to Trump. Because, you know, I got to get Trumped.
Yeah, as they call them, but the base. And I think the base is 75% of the country, far beyond the Republican Party, because we're a party of common sense, and I'm a person of common sense.
75% of the country is MAGA?
I want to have low taxes. I want to have strong borders. I want to have a strong military so that China and Russia, look, they've allowed China...
Strong criminal justice system?
...and Russia to do the impossible combined. They're natural enemies. They always have been, because China needs more land and Russia has it. They've always been natural enemies, and because of Obama, it started with him, and then Biden, because he didn't know what the hell he was doing, they've now become one force, and then now they're adding Iran to it, and they're adding North Korea to it. Pretty powerful force. This is something that is unthinkable that they allowed to happen.
You know, I've said this before. Donald Trump is not a believer, right? I don't know whether you'd call him cynical or what you would call him. There's people who are believers. There's people who want to be passionate about something. They want to be passionate about their beliefs and their dogma. And, you know, it could be their religion. It could be their political party. It could be their neighborhood. It could be their family. You know, they're just true believers. They drink the Kool-Aid, right? And, you know, people have different levels of that in their system. And it's a good thing if you believe in something that's, you know, God, and God, not your religion, but God, like real God, like, you know, the one true God, not the one true God of your religion, not the one that some people say this is the one true God, but the actual true God. Like if you connect to God, you connect to your soul on a deep level, and you're getting, you know, you're becoming better and better at that. At connecting to God, right? Where you're evolving in your pursuit. This is called spirituality, and I talk about it extensively. And if you're a fanatic about that, it's great. You know, but it's going to scare people away. Like, people are scared of fanatics. There's a great line in the disastrous movie of M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender. Like, he's made some real turds, but that's like the worst one. And my kids had watched the show, and they loved the show, but he did a horrible job. And there's a moment at the end that this really bad kid actress is saying, it's time to show, like this girl was about to dive into this pool and become a fish, like the moon spirit or something. And she was about to give up her life. And she goes, it's about time we show them we believe in what we believe as much as they believe in what they believe. And, you know, it's really, I mean, it's an epically badly delivered line, and it's a bad line. But, you know, there's this fanatical aspect and fanaticism of people believing in things. And there are many fanatical Trumps that believe in Trump. And he caters to them. And he's realized
that he can tell him the truth like he is here, and he can show you what it's all about for him, and it's about him. He doesn't care about Hillary being locked up or not locked up. He doesn't care about the criminal justice system. He doesn't care about the police. He doesn't care about the rule of law. He doesn't care about any of these things. He cares about the fact that they're in a club, and it's about him. He cares about himself, right? That they mistreated him by going after him criminally. But again, they never put him in jail because they didn't want him in jail, and he's too stupid to realize it because he's an asset, right? And his followers are too stupid to realize it because, they are fanatical about it. They have to believe in something, and there's nothing to believe in America. Their religion is sucky, and it's hard for them to be fanatical about that. And there isn't any other, these people who are Republican in their orientation, and they have to believe, they believe in their lifestyle and these things, fanatical about so-called being patriots. And this fanaticism blinds them to what he's telling them every single day, that he's using them and he's a piece of shit and he doesn't believe in what they believe. He's not a believer, right? I mean, he believes in Trump. He believes in the cult of Trump. He believes that he should be loved. He believes he should be, adored and all these things, right? And, one of my viewers just pointed out that this fight, fight, fight thing they're yelling, that Trump was mouthing the words, which I pointed out when I covered it, and it just reminded me of that. Looking at that moment where he's yelling fight, 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 but he's not yelling it. Like you could hear him say, I got to find my shoes, because he's right near the microphone. But he was just mouthing the words fight, 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 because he was doing it performatively, which he said he was. He said he wanted to show the crowd who stuck around through this whole thing that he was okay, because he was, they somehow hit a, major artery in the tip of his ear in this cut that never happened. And this ketchup was gushing out everywhere. And so, he's just a performer. The WWE stuff is just like, they don't believe in sports. They don't believe in, any of the things they're saying. It's an act, right? It's a performance for the people that are, who believe in it, the people who like it, who like the, like Hulk Hogan and like this stuff, right? It's not for themselves, right? When I make these videos and things, it's not for me. Like, I'm not listening to this stuff and going, oh, wow, this is really great. Like, I'm not a fan. I've said this. I'm not a fan of my, this is information that I think is important. Like, I have to believe in, what I do here, right? Because I'm one of those people that if I don't believe in what I'm doing, it sucks for me, right? Like, I have to believe it has value, but it doesn't really have value to me. Like, I've already made my decisions. Like, I don't need to, watch any of this stuff, I guess, to make fun of it with my wife or something, right? But it's, I wouldn't participate in the viewing of political stuff and a lot of these things, and certainly celebrity stuff, if I didn't present it to you all, right? But, I'm authentic and genuine in what I believe, right? I know that there are people here who are Christian or atheists, or they're never going to do the Sajmarg meditation, which is fine, right? That's their whatever. But I talk about what a great system it is because I know it's a good thing. It's been good for me, right? But in terms of, you all, like, you guys are going to do whatever you're going to do, right? You're going to believe whatever you're going to believe. But I'm going to be authentic in my presentation. And I could gather a bigger audience by pretending to believe what you believe, right? I could, pretend to be a Trumper or pretend to be a Christian, and I'd get way more views, and I'd get a lot more money, and I'd be able to, get more everything. Because there's a bigger audience that believes what you believe than believe what I believe, right? There's a lot more people like you than a lot in terms of the Trumpers and the Christians and the, whoever it is, or liberals or Taylor Swift fans or any number of, I could find the biggest demographic of people and tell them what they want to hear and pretend to be one of them. And, that's just icky. But that's what Trump has done. Like, he's obviously done that. And everyone can see it but the Trumpers, which is great. Like, they're completely oblivious to it. And he keeps on telling them over and over again, like he did here, that he is not into what they're into. And yet they won't hear it. They just won't see it or hear it. And no matter what you do, they never will. Because they're believers. They become fanatics of this guy. And they've put everything into him. And, it's... there was a tweet, like, I get these tweets recommended to me, and I don't know who posted this tweet. I think it must be
somebody who's a liberal, and they were showing people walking out of a Trump rally. I couldn't find anything. It just seemed like there were people who were leaving. A bunch of them. Maybe they just all had to go. I don't know what it was, right? But, that would be a rarity where people would be offended by something he said and would see through what he's presenting here. Because the evidence was there with Operation Warp Speed, the way he got worked on COVID, and everything he's done since, and his whining constantly about being persecuted. And just in the fakeness of his, like this, I mean, it's just so bad. Like, it's just obvious. It's just all there for people to see. Okay, so this is all the stuff I had from yesterday. Now I have to go copy the stuff, take some video of these other things about it being hacked and the 666 stuff with the Olympics and the rest of it. Okay, so this happened.
The Trump campaign saying it's been hacked by what it is calling foreign sources who are trying to interfere in the 2024 election. I'm joined now by CNN contributor Lulu Garcia-Navarro and CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp. It's great to see both of you here on the Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, what do you guys have to add to the hacking thing? Like, how are you experts in this? So, say who it is, right? Is it people who just want you to pay them, right? There's hacking is out of control. These companies are being extorted all the time. Cybercrime is a freaking nightmare. And they're not telling you all about it. But there's been major hacking of big companies lately, the shutting down the airport, and then they blame it on other things, but anytime there's a computer glitch or something like that, it's hacking. Of course, there was what happened with the refineries and the refinery and the gasoline production a couple years ago. And, hacking is more than likely going to be the end of, at least a big contributing factor to the end of all this. If they're hacking these companies and campaigns, they can hack elections and they can hack anything. It's just going to be, and people are going to have their own team of hackers, right? Everyone's going to have their own team of hackers, and they already do. And so, I don't know what Trump's campaign used in terms of, you saw what happened when the DNC got hacked years ago. But this, there's always every day there's something, right?
Essie, let's start first with you. There are shades of 2016 to this, as our reporter Jeremy Herb was just kind of laying out. And we have known that foreign actors want to interfere in the U.S. election.
Yeah, this is a huge problem. It's not a problem that we're unprepared for, but it's good to be a constant reminder that...
What do you mean? If he got hacked, then you're unprepared for it. You're totally unprepared for it, just like... The DNC got hacked, and then Podesta got hacked the same year for Hillary Clinton, 2016. And we don't know what kind of hacking has gone on where it isn't, there's no acknowledgement of it because there's a payoff, right? They pay the hackers to get back in control of their stuff again, right? Because you can make lots of money doing this, and these are happening in foreign countries, so prosecuting them and even catching them is impossible. And so they can just do this. And, it's all profit for them, right? They just, they have, the people have to have their website. Trump has to have his, whatever information he has to keep that private, and he has to control his, whatever it is, his website and his social media presence. And if they get control of that, they'll have to pay him, right? There's just no two ways about it.
Hacking, disinformation, this is a big part, especially by foreign entities. This is a big part of why, as voters, we need to be really educated, diligent, vigilant.
What do you mean? How does your education... She's talking about disinformation, which is anything that's not the official story, right? And the official story, of course, is disinformation. So the whole thing's just silly, right? Trump reportedly refers to Harris as a bitch in private. New York Times reports goes inside and calls the worst 3 weeks of Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And apparently, people inside the camp, the Trump camp, say that he says, Trump has often been in a foul mood the past few weeks. He has ranted about Harris. He calls her nasty on Fox and Friends and a bitch repeatedly in private, according to two people who learned the remark on different occasions. I'm sure he says that pretty much about any woman that he's mad about, right? Come on, it's just silly. Somebody put together this compilation.
Please welcome Donald Trump.
Joining us on the phone, Donald Trump.
Please welcome Donald Trump.
Stop.
Watch your head. Very tall.
How are you?
Nice to see you. How's it going?
So she's smooching with Mika.
Donald Trump. Joy said the guy wears a tube.
He says that it's his own hair. So I believe him because I believe Donald. He's an upstanding American.
And have Republicans.
So they're trying to say the difference between the way they treated Donald Trump then and now. And this is put out by Trumpers. But there's a reason why, because he became a politician. He went far to the right. Before he was one of them, right? He wasn't a conservative, wasn't Republican. He didn't share any of the beliefs of the MAGA like people. He didn't. Like MAGA people weren't fans of Donald Trump and The Apprentice. He was a New York City guy, and he hobnobbed with New York City people and these celebrities and these people and these other people. And so he was one of them. And then he became one of he became one of them to them, right? He was one of them to us. These guys, he was one of these liberals, and now he's one of them to the liberals. He's a conservative. And so it isn't that these people have changed. They're, just being the same old shills that they've always been, right? They're horrible people. So this is like, a silly video because it's Donald Trump who's changed, right? Okay, so this was from last night, today's Sunday, August 11th. And they had the pentathlon, and there's a woman named Hall, something, I don't know what her first name is. Just fast forwarding through these things. And she was supposed to have a chance at a medal, but it didn't pan out. They didn't cover the decathlon. But they showed the final race. It was like the 1500 or something. And she won the race. But the way the pentathlon works is that you get points for how far like if you finish 2 seconds before somebody, you get so many points. Like it's based in the time of the race, like what your time is. And so they were keeping score because it was the last event for the overall pentathlon, and she got 6606. And it kept on flashing, the numbers kept on changing, but it eventually settled on 6606. It kept on doing it. It kept on hitting that number, and finally when the race was over, that was her final score. And so this is, another example of 666. Of course, she finished fifth, which is the pentagram, right? The pentagram is, 5, and the whole coven, this is a female activity, the coven of witches, which we covered earlier. And we know that this was a theme throughout the Olympics, and it happened again to Jordan Childs, the gymnast. Jordan Childs was given back her bronze medal because appeal was 4 seconds too late. IOC says, remember, there was a big 666 with her, and she's now fifth. So what happens was, right, there's 5 gymnasts, right? They have a coven of gymnasts. There's 5 gymnasts on her team, and she was given a point 0.1, and see here, it was she went to a 13.766. So that's the score after the appeal. Before that, she was at 13.666, and she was fifth, right? So now she's back into fifth. Again, the 5, the pentagram, the number of witches in a coven. And, I barely cover stuff like that, but I mean, it needs to be said. And she said on social media, she's taking a break from social media for her mental health, because she's flipping out. But of course, the girl from whatever country that now has the medal, Romania or something, she got, she had the medal and she had it snatched from her. And then her country said, well, they filed the complaint too late, and this whole thing, right? And then during the Olympics, this ad ran.
I can't believe I'm doing this. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, 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 666. So it's on September 6th. Beetlejuice, 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 September 666. And so that was on the Olympics. Right when all this stuff, I think, was kind of happening, like the same viewing period, like last night on prime time. I think all this stuff happened. Of course it did, because this is when I saw it, right? So there's just a big bunch of 666 at the kind of the big last day. The Americans had an epic basketball game win against France and some other things, right? It's just like today's the last big day, like track and field and things. But the Olympics are wrapping up, and 666 is so prominent. So it's the mark of the beast. That's what that means. It's in Revelation, that there be an Antichrist, and the Antichrist to be coming. And don't say it's Kamala, just like it's just silly, like whatever it is, because the revelation should be taken with a grain of salt, but it means something to them, right? And so in the book of Revelations, there was an Antichrist is supposed to come that would wear the mark of the beast, which would be 666. And certainly we saw a lot of that, a lot of inversion, all the things that we saw with the opening ceremony. I mean, this was just, if anything's the mark of the beast, it's this Olympics, right? So a few more things to get to here. Kamala Harris was humiliated by Doug Emhoff, who was at the Olympics last night, sitting next to the prime minister and his pedo former teacher that's like 30 years older than him. Looks like a dude. Kamala Harris was humiliated by Doug Emhoff after affair bombshell, and hoped to shift the spotlight away from scandal with Tim Walz VP announcement. They get into how they broke the story here at the Daily Mail and all this stuff. But she was humiliated. There they are. And she said, once a cheater, always a cheater. And that she worries she's going to cheat on her and all these things. And, of course, she's just so moral and upstanding. And there's the two women. There's his wife. And there's his hoe. And together, they're all one big happy family. And there's Dougie Fresh. Economist signals a reckoning looming on the market, paying ahead. It's coming. There's going to be economic hardship coming. I don't know when it's going to be. We're going to see it probably after the election. We'll see what happens.
As you said, you're preparing to become the president?
He laughed, right? Because look who he's talking to.
I'm preparing to run for president.
You are, Corey?
Are you really? Are you being serious?
At some point, yes. Not now.
Is that an exclusive announcement, or have you talked about this before?
No. Well, I don't know. That's good. I guess it is exclusive.
Yeah, because it's a joke, and this is the only person that's going to... he's smiling. Because, you're Corey Feldman, right? The Coreys have destroyed the name Corey, right? Because everybody who's named Corey has this frickin' this albatross hanging around their neck, right? This bad luck Shreplock, this Corey Feldman is one of the biggest jokes and clowns out there. Apparently he's running for president. Okay, so let's end here with Tim Walz. These things just came up, 2 short videos here.
This one's personal for me. About IVF and reproductive care.
Okay, so IVF and reproductive care are the exact opposite, right? I mean, if you have reproductive care in terms of having a baby, that's the opposite of having an abortion, right? You can understand that, right, Tim? He's such a bad actor. He's the kind of bad actor. I mean, they're just always campaigning to dumb people. I mean, the president election is just about low vibration, low consciousness, dumb people, right? But here he's going to get emotional about his, him and his wife's issues with getting pregnant, right? Which is the opposite of having an abortion.
When my wife of 30 years, because yes, we share family values, we just make our own damn choices about our family.
Okay, so what are you talking about? You wanted to have a baby. It's completely different. And there's no issues with people wanting to have babies.
When we wanted to have children, we went through years of fertility treatment. And I remember it was like it was yesterday, just waiting for good news. And then the phone would ring and you would be tensed up. And then you would hear that the treatments had failed. It would blot out the sun.
Why? Because you really wanted to have a baby? You think about this, right? It would blot out the sun. Because that's how important it is to bring a life into the world, a baby. It's a human life, right? And so abortion would then be murder, right, Tim? Your argument is silly. Why would you be talking about this in terms of a woman's right to choose? Abortion. Yeah, let me tell you about my abortion experience. Well, my wife and I couldn't have a baby, so we went through an IVF hell. And when there was no pregnancy, we would blot out the sun.
that you just wanted something so beautiful and so simple to have a child.
Yeah, a human life.
And then one day,
Except when you don't want it, you just want to kill it. That's, like, what are you talking about?
and it wasn't by chance when that news came and we welcomed our daughter into the world.
Woo! 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 You had a baby, you didn't abort it. Woo! Well, imagine if they got IVF just so they could abort it. So we changed our mind and we aborted it. So we went through IVF hell, and then we realized, hey, we really don't want a little rugrat right around here. So we decided to kill the fetus.
We named her Hope.
No way.
Named her Hope.
Hope. We named her Hope. That's what we named her, Hope. Yes, Hope. His name is Hope. We were hopeful that we would have a baby.
I'm not crying, you're crying. Look.
Oh, you're not a baby. You're not a baby out of Hope. Here's Hope and her dad here.
Minnesota Governor Walz here, along with
Hope.
We're making sure we remind all of you hands-free driving starts on the 1st of August. We want to make sure our teen drivers are not texting and...
No. I think it's actually mostly bald men.
Cut.
Bald men. Old bald guys. Right? Old bald guys that look like Joe Biden. This is, a while back. Aren't you so glad that you didn't abort her?
All right, once again, Minnesotans, we're here.
So she could make fun of your bald.
Making sure millennials are putting down the phone. And
I think it's actually adults, Dad. Like older people like you.
Cut.
Hey guys, this is Hope Walz and I'm here with my dad, Governor Walz. And we're just here talking about the new hands-free law, and I'm just going to show him how to prop his phone up so it's not in his hand and he can still see his navigation. All right, just like this.
Cut. Hey, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz here. What in the...
Boom. Look at her bringing the funny. Like, it's just so, so wonderful having kids.
Governor Walz here trying to get rid of a child for anyone.
Boom. He wants to get rid of children. See? He wants late-term abortion. He just said it. Listen to him.
Walz here, what in the... Governor Walz here trying to get rid of a child.
He just wants to get rid of children. Clip that. They just clip this part right here, you Republicans. That's all you need.
Governor Walz here trying to get rid of a child.
Boom. That's all you need to hear. The guy just doesn't... He's for late-term abortions. He wants, to abort a 17-year-old.
You might have seen a few people showed up in Philadelphia the other night.
So now they're showing the crowds for when it's for Kamala, and it's driving Trump nuts.
And then 10,000 plus walked into a field in western Wisconsin.
Woo!
And then on Wednesday, the largest crowd of the campaign showed up in Detroit, Michigan.
Woo!
But Arizona just couldn't leave it alone, could you?
Woo! He's such a tool. These people are so annoying in their own special way. Like, they're different, but they're the same, and they're all annoying.
It's not as if anybody cares about crowd sizes or anything.
Boy, he sucks. Not that he's better than Trump, but he sucks in his own special way. Okay, did the mashup. YouTube isn't picking thumbnails for me anymore. They only pick one. They used to give me 3 options. And I get kind of lazy. When I'm done with the video, I'm just kind of over it. And so that's why my titles are often misspelled and I don't check them. It's like I make it to the end of the video. It's like a marathon. I have nothing left for. But now I have to do my own thumbnails, so F them, But I did a mashup between the Beetlejuice 666 and this great moment when Trump said he was going to lock her up, and then he didn't. He broke his promise. I've gotten to a place where I get a lot of joy out of watching this thing. Of course, like I said, I cover it for you all, and but it's my job, and you like to enjoy your work or whatever. I went through the same thing that everyone else goes through. In 2000, and I would say, 2004, 2005, when I had my what truthers call waking up. I'd already had my spiritual awakening. I don't want to make that distinction in the introduction to the next video. I'm going to lay down that audio today for my, next intro. Hopefully that'll be the first intro, because like I'm always adding intros as stuff comes in. But in terms of, the waking up to the system, my brother was a truther, and he had told me things, and I had my own moments. I was never someone who bought into the system, so I had my own, feeling about like everybody else. And I knew the system was corrupt, and I knew politics was a joke, these things. I knew the American dream was a lie. But that moment when the big event, 2001, when I realized there was a whole nother level of evil and psychological operations going on. And when I had that, realization, it took me like 2 weeks to just like sort of digest it, right? And, that you realize the people who are running the system are like your enemies in the way that they're, mistreating all of us, right? And my wife and I watched a movie. It was kind of like a homemade truther movie on Amazon, which I forget the name. It was about a plantation. I'm going to talk about that in the introduction to the next video. So it's a good movie on this, this kind of subject. Well, you know that the system is against you, and then you go through it, right? And I also knew that the system was inevitably going to collapse. There was predictions in the book Reality at Dawn from Babaji, the second master of the Sajmark system, and I fully believed him to be a reliable source, and even more so now. And then there's these prophecies in the Whispers of the Brighter World. The reason I said, don't immediately think that the Antichrist is Kamala because of, what I said, the book of Revelation, that the stuff in the Bible has been edited, it's been translated, and heavily edited and heavily translated. And the people who originally channeled the information were Jesus' disciples. I'm not sure no one knows where the book of Revelation came from. No one's even sure who wrote it, right? And so it's kind of an interesting book. It's a lot of where the end of world stuff is, the doomsday stuff. I found it interesting when I was a kid when I read it. But you have to take it with a grain of salt, just like I take there's these prophecies I'm going to read, and they're very specific. And one of these big events is going to go down, according to the prophecies, at the end of 2025, between 2025 and 2026. So like one more year, 1 year and a half. And everything's like, this is going to be like a really big event, and then the things that are going to happen afterwards. And I don't know if it's an economic collapse, but there seems to be a lot of predictions about nuclear. I'm going to read all the predictions to you. But until they happen, like, maybe if the person got it wrong, maybe it's, something's changed, right? But like, I'm pretty sure if the predictions don't come, aren't to the date, they're not far off, because we're doing really poorly. I mean, it's getting worse. People are getting much worse. And the system is, collapsing on its own, and the people are collapsing on their own, and they're working together, which, makes it exponential, right? When the two things are working together to go in the wrong direction. And there's just a need for it to happen. Like, something's got to stop the degradation, right? Like, it just got to stop. There's going to be a time where my lifestyle is going to change. All of our lifestyle, right? It's going to change. We're not going to have internet. We're not going to have electricity. We're not going to have running water, whatever it is, right? We're going to live in fear. It's going to be chaos. I mean, it's the system that's holding everybody together is going to fall apart, and then people will fall apart. They're not going to be able to get their medication. People will be freaking out, right? People will be depressed, and the system that we're 100% dependent on won't be there for us anymore. And that's going to suck, and it's going to be great and suck at the same time. Great for us spiritually, great for our future of humanity, this abomination going away, but bad for us in the immediate, in terms of our lifestyle and our needs and our, whatever it is, our habits. And so when that happens, that happens. But up until that point, it's a really interesting time in history, watching the degradation, watching the breakup of this thing. And a lot of truth is coming out. And it's getting obvious. Their perception is changing. Like, some of it has to do with the internet, but some of it has to do with the spiritual awakening. And there are people who have abilities, latent spiritual abilities, And, they have potential to become something good, something special. I don't want to say special. Special is not a word I like to use. They can step into their abilities and their evolution, even though it's not present now. It might look like this person's just a regular dope, but they have more inside them to offer younger people, right? And that they can thrive in the apocalypse and the post-apocalypse. But, it's a really interesting time, right? It's like it's new. It's like things are happening that have never happened before, and things are being revealed that have never been revealed before, and we're able to see things like we haven't seen before. And it's a time where you can really be alive. Like the time before, it was just the system wasn't going to change, and you just had to knuckle under and punch the clock and just walk along in a stupor. And just, there's not, even if you woke up, it wasn't going to make any difference. You were just going to be miserable in the matrix. Nothing was going to, you weren't going to see the collapse anytime soon. And so the system was just going to go the way it was going to go. And you just had to, if you were awake, it was painful. Like you want to go back into the matrix and take the blue pill and go back to sleep, right? But now you have it's a different reality where the end is nigh, and you're going to watch the end of something. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting part of the show, the most exciting part of the show, the climax of our civilization. And, I'm kind of into it, right? I'm not a popcorn fan, but people always say, grab the popcorn. And if you look at it that way, it makes it easier, right? It's going to suck afterwards, but you're going to have an interesting time up until that point. If you don't, try to deceive yourself and, believe that Trump is going to save you. Once you get rid of all that shit, it's just a burden of fake, self-delusion because you can't deal with the fact that, the system that you are 100% dependent on is coming to an end. And so, if you take a breath and you embrace it, of course, connecting to God internally and becoming a spiritual person and, having a spiritual goal and all the stuff I said about death is, maybe was it this one or the last one? I don't know. Maybe the last video. I haven't seen any comments about it, so I think it's this one. I think I talked about death in the beginning. They all blend together. Again, these videos aren't for me. I'm not the attended audience. But anyways, all this stuff, if you just let it all go and you're like, all right, I accept it the way it is. I accept what I'm seeing here. And I'm going to prepare the best I can and prepare the people around me. Those who are willing, or wanting to be prepared. And, let's see what happens, right? It's going to be this is like the end of something to all of us. But when you're watching a movie, a apocalyptic movie, or a movie where somebody's life changed dramatically, this is like when Luke Skywalker meets, not that I'm talking about, those movies suck, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? When he gets that, that message, he has he buys R2-D2. And so his life was boring up to that point, and he was living a lie and didn't know who he was, right? And then he buys R2-D2, and then that's when the movie begins, right? And we're at that point where we're buying R2-D2, right? We're at that point when, the spaceship shows up in the sky, and everything's the same, or the meteor shows up in the sky, right? We're at that point where, something's the beginning of a really exciting movie or series of movies, right? We're at the beginning of that change that happens where you're sitting there and you're lost and you don't know what's going on or why, what's your goal, what's your purpose, what's your reason for being. You don't know any of those things, right? You're just, getting along, go along to get along, whatever they say, right? Stupid saying. And then all of a sudden something huge happens. And I should say this again, at the beginning of some, not the end of the video, but people who've made it here get this little gem, it's not that I'm saying it, but it's truth, right? We're at the beginning of the apocalyptic movie of the change that's going to happen. We're at the beginning of the transformation. And so, it's something for us like it's all we ever knew. But most of us aren't really all that happy with all we ever knew. We're just scared of what might be. And we should be, right? A little bit, right? Because it's natural. We're scared of the unknown. But it's coming, right? It's going to happen. And there's going to be some big things happening that we're going to see that are going to be, transformational, eye-opening, and, reveals of information and things and truths. And then the spiritual aspect, the ability to connect to God will increase, and there's all that stuff, right? The Gratefullness meditation channel. Somebody asked, where are your other channels? There's a description box below every video, and that's where all that kind of stuff is. Like, if you haven't figured that out yet, maybe you're new to YouTube, but, that's where you find it. Anyways, toodles. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.